Good afternoon, it's 5 p.m. and you're watching CIPR TV with me, Russell Goldsmith, and Stephen Wannington.
Hello.
Today's show concentrates on the big society, and we're joined in the studio by Bell Pottinger's Claire Cater and CIPR's Jane Wilson.
Claire leads the Brand Democracy Group at Bell Pottinger, helping clients with ambitious change programmes. She's currently writing the Big Small Book, a rough guide to the big society. And Bell Pottinger has produced some interesting research into this topic, including a State of the Nation survey on attitudes to contributing to society. Now, Jane Wilson joined the CIPR as Chief Executive in October. She's experienced in PR and marketing, including leadership roles at Scottish Media Group, Capital Radio and GCAP Media Group. Both our guests have worked in-house and in consultancy and in the public and private sector. A very warm welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Now, if you've got a question for either of our guests or simply want to comment on the discussion, you can contact the studio in the usual way using the question box below the video player that you're watching us on. Or if you're following us on Twitter, then just tweet using the hashtag #CIPRtv, and I know we've had a lot of those already. What I can tell you is that we've had an unprecedented number of questions and comments for the show from CIPR members, and we'll aim to get through as many as we can, as quick as we can in the time available. Now, before we get to those, let's remind ourselves of some of the background to the issue. We've got a clip here of David Cameron speaking about the big society at a Downing Street event, which we have courtesy of number10.gov.uk.
I've been saying for the last 4.5 years that I want to empower the voluntary sector, social enterprises, social capital, the big society, all the things that can actually help us to build a stronger and bigger society in Britain. And I can't think of a better way of empowering you than actually starting by sitting around the cabinet table in power, effectively. Actually, I profoundly believe that if we want real social change, if we want to solve our deepest social problems, we have to involve your organisations and work with you and through you. And today's agenda, really, for me, is hearing from you what more we can do to help catalyse social action and social enterprise in our country. But to me, personally, what I would most like to be a legacy is actually helping to build the big society through the work that all of you and many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands like you around our country do.
So, our first comment is from Andrew Hawkins from Comres. Now, he said that their polling data shows that consumers don't know what the big society is. So perhaps we could start with a definition. Claire?
Oh, now there's a tricky one. It's probably the most important thing to say is there is no one-line definition of the big society. I think that's the very point. What it actually is about a huge shift in our society, in our culture. It's about shifting the power from central government down to local people, giving them choice and empowerment in return for shared responsibility. It's a bit like if you try and imagine the power of the internet and how that's empowered populations. It's a bit like replicating that in everyday society. It's a bit like saying to people, you can't take rather, without an equal amount of give, if that makes sense. So it's about fairness and democracy. It's a set of principles and values. And yes, beneath that there are lots of initiatives as well, but they're probably the most important bits to understand.
Okay. Jane, what?
No, absolutely, you're right. It is more of a philosophy than an action plan. And actually, it's one of those things where everyone seems to have an opinion, but no one has a definition because there is no definition for this. But essentially, it seems to be crystallising into 3 areas. That transfer from central government to local communities, greater accountability, and a different way in which public services might be delivered in the future.
Okay.
First question here. We saw from the David Cameron clip at the start of the show that it's an idea that comes right from the top of government, but what's it going to look like day to day in practice within local society?
It's probably fair to say that a lot of things are kind of already happening out there, but if you're a man in the street in everyday society, it might mean that you're more involved in the local decision making with your council. You might be asked, where should we spend money? Where should we cut services? It might be that as part of your job, your employer makes it more of a key part of your role to volunteer and take part in the community. And that might actually become a key part of your personal development as you progress in your career. For some companies are doing that already, but that actually might become the social norm. Councils, for example, are going to be given something called, under the localism bill, called the power of competence, which means they can no longer be restricted about what they can and can't do as long as it's not illegal. and it's within, you know, within their gift, then they can do new things. It will mean the growth of things like the social enterprise sector, businesses who are either reinvesting for social growth and social benefit, or businesses whose business is about delivering benefits to their communities, and we see that growing exponentially. More staff taking on running of businesses. In the NHS, 250,000 staff have already done just that and are running 61 social enterprises, which I think represents something like £900 million of business, which people probably don't even realise. And those sorts of things will continue to grow. And I guess it'll be more of us doing more things for ourselves, where, you know, we might see a broken fence and wait for the council to mend it. Well, it might be that we do that sort of thing ourselves, but a whole heap of things, from whether you're a business or you're an individual or you're a local authority. But one way or another, you're going to get more engaged, and you're going to be able to, through things like the power of transparency, have access to more information too. So lots of changes, and a lot of it's already started.
Okay. Well, Jane, I know in the lead up to the show, as soon as we said that you're going to be on the sofa today, you've had a load of emails come through to you personally. We've got some here. A number of the viewers have raised questions about the way the idea is being communicated. Ipsos, Mori and YouGov have polls that show the majority of the public are unaware of the big society. So the comment here is, it's not a great start for a flagship initiative, is it? I mean, do you want to take that first? And I know, Claire, you've got some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is a great start in communication terms, and it is a vague concept which, unlike spending cuts, which is very concrete and people get, this is something people are trying to understand. Well, what does it encompass and what does it mean? And I think some people are trying to put issues and ideas into it which perhaps may or may not have a natural home there. But importantly, it's as controversial as it is nebulous, and I'm definitely seeing that from the 30-odd pages of feedback that I've received from our members. And I think what's really important and what's coming through in the feedback that I get is that if this is about localism and local initiatives, then government is perhaps not the best place for the communication to come from. If it's about being local, then it has to be local communication delivered locally, and that needs local champions and a local framework. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there about what that will mean for people. What will that mean for the services which may be under threat? And this whole do-it-yourself approach of, you know, does that mean that we will then have well-meaning amateurs taking on roles that perhaps before have been done by professionals? So yes, there is a big job to do, both in terms of the messaging and what's in it and what isn't, but also in who delivers that message and what the public understand. Okay.
Now, Claire, you've got some slides and some research prepared.
I have. Before we go to the first slide, I'd probably like to say I agree with Jane completely. I think probably, and I hope you don't mind, Mr. Cameron, if you're watching, you never know, is that quite...
He watches every week we get emails.
He watches every week, he logs on, wow. It's seriously, I think the fact that Mr. Cameron, our Prime Minister, is the face of it, is exactly been one of the problems. Yeah. People think, therefore, that it's political. They expect it to be some kind of policy, and they therefore expect a document and a set of targets. And actually, whilst they talk about shifting the power from the centre to the locality, it still seems to be the centre that's banging on about it. And so Jane's exactly right.
But it's billed as David Cameron's big society,
absolutely.
Isn't it? So, I mean, is that...
And it should not be. It's the people's society. Right. It's the people's community. Okay. And that is the issue. So, you know, Jane is right. And I think I've got a couple of slides, I think.
Yeah. Well, the viewers will see these as they as you talk over them. They'll be on screen for them. So, in fact, the first slide is up on their screen now.
Okay.
So if you want to...
Probably the first thing to say is that people really support it. I mean, last July, so whilst there's lots of chatter at the moment, that's natural. The controversy is kind of part of the pain barrier we need to go through. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But if you look at how people received it last year, people thought overwhelmingly, 50% thought that it was a good idea for Britain as a whole, and particularly young people, and for their local areas, and some of them for them personally, but actually people thought it was a good idea. And we need to hold on to that the principles people thought were good. And now, of course, while cuts are coming in force, people are finding it a bit tricky because they're aligning the two. The other is, if you could
there should be another second slide. Yeah, this will be up on the screen now. So
brilliant. This goes to the heart of the communications issue, which is we keep banging on, or we don't, everyone keeps talking big society, when actually, when it comes to talking to people, they relate to their local communities. And in the research we did, the first bit of research, we couldn't understand why we couldn't get people engaged. We were asking them lots of questions, and basically we weren't getting a lot of answers. And what we did was we asked all the same questions, but actually exchanged society for community, and people automatically got involved. People care about what's close to home, what matters to them, and that's what we've got to focus on. Okay. Make it relevant to me.
Okay.
So let's pick up on that point of the connection between the big society and the cuts that are coming down. And Anne Nichols, CIPR member, makes the point the big society is a way of putting positive spin on local cuts. And Neil Churchill, another member writing in Health Service Journal, says, isn't the big society, doesn't it a euphemism for the withdrawal of the state and the 1.2 billion in cuts that are coming down the track? I mean, how do you get over that? The two issues surely are completely aligned.
It's very difficult. It's certainly been a theme of the feedback that I've received so far. We have something in the region of 30% of our members who work in local public services, and that's probably the biggest theme from them. The two are undoubtedly linked in the minds of the general public, and I guess from my point of view, and I'm sure Claire will have a view that she can articulate, whilst I think it's incredibly important for the CIPR to look at the effects of this policy, of this initiative on our professional practice, and to address it and to as it rolls out, to ensure that our profession are properly prepared and that there's an open debate. I don't think it's the role of the CIPR as an apolitical organisation to question the motivation of the policy. So it's linked to the cuts, and whether it's an ideology dressing up a series of cuts is not something I can comment on behalf of my members. But I think Claire probably has some.
Yeah, I mean,
views.
I agree with Jane. I think it is difficult, and that we're having this conversation because it's being so politicised, because it's been talked about by Mr. Cameron, and there is a link to the cuts because we have less money, so that's one of the drivers as to why we need to change society. That doesn't mean that big society is a way of dressing that up. Some of the things within it are helping us respond, and I guess we can't argue with the sentiment. I can't comment on whether I agree with the cuts and the speed and the depth of those cuts, because they're different everywhere in the country, and I can completely sympathise with anybody who's watching right now who's working a department that's losing money and who's trying to engage their local population and explain why they've had to cut an important service. But don't use big society to dress it up. That's not what it's here for. We're trying to change the way we live and work, and that's part of a bigger picture.
Okay. Well, we've got lots to get through. We're well over halfway through the show, and just a quick reminder that if you do have any questions, please use the box below the screen that you're watching on, and they'll come through to us, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. As I said, if you're following us on Twitter, I know our regular presenter at Sheldrake has tweeted a few times, and apparently he's now following you, Claire, on Twitter as well. He's ill at home, so apologies from Philip. That's why you've got me in his place again. So we've now got the next question that has come through, and it's from Charlotte Stamper. Now, she's saying that the particular pressures that communicators working in local public sectors are facing from the government, perhaps particularly from DCLG, one of the key big society departments. Do you have any views on this?
This is back to the challenge of the communicators in local government that are, on the one hand, having to implement the big society or the front line, but also seeing the budget cuts.
Charlotte gave some really interesting feedback to me when I emailed our members, and it's a very big, important issue. It goes back again to this point about this is an initiative which has not been well communicated, and it's been communicated centrally. And a theme that I am getting time and time again from our members is that, on the one hand, government is going to really have to muster all its resources to make this work locally, and will have to depend on those who are professional communicators and public relations practitioners at a local level. But at the same time, those people feel that the government is at the same time taking potshots at the public relations practitioners working within the public sector, and not valuing the role of public relations in terms of public engagement and motivating local communities. So that's a massive challenge, and I don't know how the government are going to address that. It goes to the point about the cuts. So it's not just that the cuts and the Big Society programme are happening at the same time. It's that those cuts are affecting the people who could potentially do the most good locally, and I don't know how we get around that.
Well, I mean, you picked on motivation. It's a question that's coming from a few people. Robin Cole, Hamilton, and also Natasha Tobin asked similar questions here. Sort of picking up from this, how do you motivate individuals to get involved, provide better services for all? Is there anything you've got sort of thoughts on that? I know, Claire, again, because we've had questions about motivation, you've got a couple of a couple more slides to pick up on those. I don't know if you want to take that one.
Well, there are lots of ways to motivate people. I think the key thing we found was that when we were talking about how do you motivate people is people assume that everybody's motivated in the same way, and they're not. I think if we go to the first slide.
Okay, well, I think that will be on our viewer's screen.
And that'll be on your viewer's screen. What it shows is that surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly for your viewers, is that people are motivated about how something makes them feel, and about they want to feel that they're really making a difference. I think the government's looked a lot at creating systems where people are rewarded with points and all sorts of different incentives. But actually our research showed that actually the vast majority, as you can see there, outweighs anything, is actually about how it makes them feel. And that goes back to how people are responding to the communications. People are missing a trick. It's about how people feel about themselves, about how they feel about their community, and about how they feel about what they're contributing to. And therefore we need a much more individualistic approach, and there's not one size fits all. And if you go to the next slide, what you'll see is this is a very top line view of how those audiences segment. There are lots of different types of people who are motivated in different ways. So the activists and the leaders, for example, who would potentially be the people to make things happen and organise things, those people in particular, 80% of them do it for how it makes them feel, not for reward and recognition. Others, such as the joiners, which are 25% of people, a big lump of people who you need to get involved to actually deliver things. They'll be the sort of people who would sort of come in last minute and get involved in something. They do want more reward and recognition, and they want things to be fun and different. And I think we can perhaps circulate this sort of thing if people are interested. I was
just going to ask that, because obviously some of those slides are quite busy.
So
if anyone wants those, we can get them to them after the show.
Yeah, you can. Okay. But actually, it's not one size fits all. There are different motivations, but it's head and heart.
Okay, so if someone wants a copy of those slides, do they email CIPR?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Feel free.
Which is fantastic. Which is info@CIPR.co.uk. There you go. Lovely.
Brilliant. Let's come back to the role of the communicator and professional practice and how this ties back to the CIPR membership. Perhaps Jane, you could tell us what's the role of the CIPR membership as a practitioners in helping to deliver the Big Society.
Well, I don't think it's the role of the CIPR membership and public relations practitioners to deliver the Big Society, because
okay, the opportunities.
The opportunities and the challenges before I get lynched by the membership. But there are supporters out there who will be members, and I think there's a couple of things that we can do as public relations practitioners. This is a time for us to show the real value that we can bring to engagement projects, that we can work locally, that we can be social analysts, as Dr. John White, one of our members, said to me, more than just media relations practitioners. And so it is about adding value to what we do in our local communities. It is about value for money. It probably is about doing more with less. But equally, if this policy is not for you and you feel strongly about it, well then who is better equipped to do something about it than those who communicate for a living?
Okay, we've just had a question that's just come through that I would like to ask, and it's going to come up on my screen now. Apparently, this is from Jane Cameron, and this is to you, Jane, if you want to take this. The Big Society is a shift in approach, but it's not a new concept if you look at the principles of cooperation, which have been around for over a century. These cooperatives currently have a turnover of 33 billion in the UK. Is this a rebranding of the cooperative principles and values? I don't know if you're happy to take that.
Absolutely.
Throwing that one in there.
Well, there is nothing new under the sun. So I guess, nobody is going to say, no, I don't think, I think that giving or volunteering is a bad thing or a poor thing. And so this is happening right across the country. The issue is people do this because they think it's the right thing to do, or it supports their communities, or for various other reasons. They don't do it to deliver a government initiative. They don't do it to serve the aims of a greater ideology. So perhaps it's the branding of it that is the issue. And I guess I would agree, yes, these things are happening. I think cooperative organisations are an amazing thing and do great work. But yeah, it's a problem that these things happen anyway.
Okay. Final thoughts?
Well, so my final thought is it will be, you know, what's my role as a communicator in this? But I think we've stated that.
The centre stage. I mean, this is the time for communicators to be centre stage. You know, the boardrooms, leadership need to rely on you. Communications is going to be the oil and the engine of society. Your roles will expand, you know, from CSR to PR to communications. You're going to be needed more than ever. You're going to need to help your organisations understand the specifics, from the localism bill to how people navigate the new environment where people are going to expect you to be more accountable and want to be more engaged. And there's the barometer of trust and social purpose. You know, how does your organisation measure up? Your boardrooms, your leaders, your communities can't do without you. You're more important than ever.
Okay. And to that end, this discussion, because it's not a debate, it's just been a sort of introductory discussion, such a vast topic, will hopefully kick-start a series of events that CIPR will organise in conjunction with Claire, which will include workshops, debates, both online and actual, key skills training, and then a conference later in the year where we hope to have some very important big names from the big society.
Yes.
But what I really hope is that government understands, that they get that this profession is fundamental to the success or otherwise of the big society, because it's a strong profession and it has a voice, and it's probably feeling a bit bruised by this government at the moment. So I hope that message comes through loud and clear.
Well, that's excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us. Thank you for all your questions and comments. Apologies if we didn't get through them all today. As I said, we've had so many, and we've tried to get through as many as we can, but we've already done over 20 minutes. So.
And we're back on the 2nd of March, when we're going to be talking about crisis communications with a man called Neil Chapman. He's the founder of Alpha Voice Communications. Now, Neil recently left BP after 14 years, and his most recent role was in the Unified Command Centre set up to respond to the Deepwater Horizon explosion and the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's going to be a very interesting discussion. Until then, I want to thank our guests again, Claire Cater and Jane Wilson, the production team at Marketeers 4DC, and you all for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye.